මැද ලයිට් ටික පොඩ්ඩක් තියාගෙන
It will. Yeah. Okay. No. I mean, when you share the presentation, the loop, you have to share audio.
Okay, the audio is not playing.
There is no audio on this, no? Is there audio?
There is audio. It's not coming out, no?
It's not coming out from this here. No, but it's not coming out from here either.
Oh, yes. That's not weird.
It's alright. Harina? What's next? So that must be something here, no?
So not stuck here.
If you take the HDMI out, it might work, no?
Why is it stuck? Just go down. Just go down. Let's see whether there's some timing issue there. Right. Yeah, over there. Speaker to light koi vetan. Haja dega.
Nah, අපි sharing නතර කරා ඒ zoom එකේ මේක තමයි එන්න ඕනේ.
Wait, I just want to just double check whether
sharing that's the top side there.
No, that's okay. That's the timing is I thought there was no. Chindaka, for this we can recreate a logo. What do you have? What is this? I'll do an artwork. So एक प्रश्न दिया
Come back in 40 minutes into that photo.
We are going to admit people at
5:30, 5:40?
5:40.
No, 5:45, no, Spencer? Admitting people is at 5:45, right?
5:30 down.
One of that.
5:30 we just let it.
Let's go in a bit.
Okay.
we said we are going to do everything from the laptop.
Okay, shall we then put it on my laptop?
Do you have the advertisements with you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Shall I get your pen drive?
Yeah.
I'm just removing the.
Don't make a first impression or lasting impression without it. Don't trade law school for life school without it. Don't turn your house into a home without it. Don't share a moment while sharing a moment without it. Don't go abroad. Go live. Or go just a little out of your comfort zone without it. Don't change the game. Or even change the world without it. And don't watch her dance like nobody's watching without it. Whatever you do, don't forget that the more you live forward, the more you need someone at your back. The powerful backing of American Express. Don't live life without it.
Nations Trust Bank Private Banking is the epitome of elite banking. With its exclusive privileges devoted to providing just the right balance between financial success and lifestyle our private banking members richly deserve. A financial solution dedicated to excellence, with an unparalleled array of products and services that enrich and enhance and empower success. A financial solution focused on wealth creation, lifestyle, and the establishment of legacy. A legacy of priority, a legacy of abundance, a legacy much desired. Creating a legacy that's timeless.
For creative support. So on the 2nd of February, we celebrated World Wetlands Day. It's a day that calls to action for wetlands with a focus and an appeal to invest financial, human, and political capital to save the those we have degraded. This was also the first year that World Wetlands Day was observed as a United Nations International Day, following its adoption by the General Assembly in August 2021 in a resolution that was co-sponsored by 75 member states. In honor of this day, the WNPS has gone on to recognize this month as Wetland Month, and we have had a series of events. This has included a wetland walk that was run by our wild kids. We had a cleanup of our Green Isle project site, and we've also partnered with Colombo Fashion Week to raise awareness on the wetlands of Sri Lanka. I would also like to remind you that there are some limited edition t-shirts. There are very few left that the Youth Wing had done that brings to life aspects of the famous Ecocide, Stop Ecocide mural we did last year. I encourage you to go check them out after the session, and if you have a chance to pick that up. If you have kids at home, there is also a new publication, storybook, the Youth Wing has done, called Finding the Mighty Little Girl in the Land of Machines. And this is also available for purchase outside. We also would like to encourage you to take up membership of the society if you aren't a member already. If you are, it's that time of year, it's the start of the year, so it's a good time to renew your membership, and we would really appreciate you taking that initiative to do so. The Yala and Udawalawe bungalows are also newly renovated and available, so please do make a booking and make a trip that way if you get the opportunity to. You can find out more about all our initiatives and our project work on our website, of course, WNPSSL.org. I know we have now gathered here really to listen to these three wonderful speakers. So let me, without further delay, introduce them. We first will be having Professor Cyril Vijayasundara speak to us. He's a research professor attached to NIFS Kandy. Since 1980, he has been associated with the Royal Botanic Gardens, Peradeniya, and retired as the Director General of the Department of National Botanic Gardens in 2015. In 2006, Professor Vijayasundara was elected a Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, Sri Lanka. We will then have Professor Sevandi Jayakodi, who holds a BSc Honours degree in Zoology from the University of Kelaniya, a postgraduate diploma in Wildlife Management and Conservation from the Wildlife Institute of India, a PhD in Zoology from the University of Aberdeen. In 1997, she joined the DWC as an assistant director and currently serves as a senior lecturer at the Wayamba University of Sri Lanka. Professor Sevandi is also a general committee member of the society. We will also be having Professor Sampath Seniviratne, who has made the conservation of Sri Lanka's birds a mission of his life. A senior lecturer in zoology at the University of Colombo, he has a PhD in evolutionary ecology from Memorial University, Canada. In addition, Dr. Seniviratne is a member of the International Ornithological Union, Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation, and the Oriental Bird Club. Sampath is also a general committee member of the WNPS. So let me begin by having Professor Cyril come and speak to us first. This one? The first one? Of this? This one, right? Oh, is it good?
Yes, yeah.
But on Zoom?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and I thank the WNPS for inviting me, and also thank you for the introduction. So without wasting much time, I'll go straight away to the topic, which is the wetlands in Sri Lanka. This is actually done in relation to, in combination with this World Wetland Day, which falls on the 2nd February every year, and so we had it this year also on the 2nd of this month. And the theme this year is Wetlands Action for People and Nature, which will be discussed at length by my colleagues, Sivanthi and Sampath, later on. So if I am to start with the definition of wetlands, this is actually the definition given by the Ramsar International Wetland Conservation Treaty. So wetlands are areas of marsh, fen, peatland or water, whether natural or artificial, permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing, fresh, brackish or salt, including areas of marine water, the depth of which at low tides does not exceed 6 meters. 6 meters because if you go deeper than 6 meters, most of the benthic rooted plants may not survive if you go deeper than 6 meters. Some people, I mean, this is arguable because some people say that it should not be 6 meters and it should be 3 meters. And some people say, no, in Spain and places like that, you can even go up to 12 meters. But then this is the standard definition. Anything that is not deeper than 6 meters, mostly in the estuarine and coastal areas, in other water bodies. So 6 meters is the level, and this is because the water may not penetrate to the benthic stratum if it is deeper than 6 meters. They have actually a characteristic vegetation of aquatic plants, and those plants are adapted to anoxic or poor oxygen and stagnant water conditions, hydric soils. We know that if you have a plant which is watered too much, and if it is in stagnant water, they may not survive. So these plants survive even if they grow in water. So this is one of the remarkable factors of these special plants that are adapted to wetlands. And then, according to the Asian Wetland Directory, there are 41 sites of international importance in Sri Lanka, and the total area covered is around 270,000 hectares. So now, when you say wetlands, what comes to your mind is Uttarai, right? But then there are so many other types of wetlands also. Basically, there are 3 types of wetlands we get in this country. Inland freshwater wetlands like rivers, streams, marshes, swamp forests, and willows, which is also unique in Sri Lanka. And then we have saltwater wetlands, lagoons, estuaries, and mangroves, seagrass beds, and coral reefs. And then we might not expect even the man-made wetlands like our river, tanks, reservoirs, and even rice fields and salters from where we get the salt. They are also classified under wetlands, although they are not natural, man-made. These is one of the 3 types of wetlands. And then if you consider streams and rivers, we are fortunate to have about 103 rivers. Many of those major rivers originate from the Central Highlands, and those rivers cover about 4,500 kilometers. And then what is important is that those rivers have a riverine vegetation on both sides, and those are very important. Now, when you say riverine vegetation, what comes to your mind? Other riverine vegetation in the dry zone, Yal and various places, so in the north central province. But then there are very interesting riverine plants in the wet zone also. For example, where we have a genus called Potonia. There are 3 species: the Potonia angustifolia, Potonia floribunda, and Potonia olifolia. These are mostly stream-side plants. If you go to Singaraj, you may remember this long-lived Potonia angustifolia. And then, of course, there was a big howl about a tree which was found on the proposed central northern highway near the place called Darulu near Kampa, and that was Crudia zelenica. That's also wet. I mean, that grows by streams, just like Kumu. So it doesn't mean that you need, it doesn't survive elsewhere in the highlands, but they are actually adapted to wetland conditions, this Crudia zelenica. If you want, we can discuss it later. So there are plants like that. And then, of course, we have willows covering about 12,500 hectares, mostly in the Mahali floodplains, and also in Vilpattu National Park also we have willows. And there are some plants which are unique to Vilpattu and to that kind of wetland, so willows rather. And this particular plant, Fimbristylis zelenica, is a sage, is only found in the willows of Vilpattu. Nowhere else on earth. It's a critically endangered plant found only in the willows of Vilpattu. Right? So there are plants like that. And then of course we have freshwater marshes where, these are the, to which category the Muthuraji comes. Those are actually located in mostly rural areas, either connected to river or receiving water through surface runoff and so forth. Those are actually with partially decomposed organic matter. And of course, Muthuraji is our biggest peat bog in Sri Lanka. And then there are swamp forests. It's actually a successional stage. You have marshland. With succession, there will be some trees growing on it, and then you have those trees in swamp. These marshes with trees, and these can be considered as swamp forests. And the most interesting swamp forest in this country is Wallavattu swamp forest, about 12 hectares, privately owned in the Kaluru River Basin. And first, recently, the members of the Gold Conservation Society have found another similar wetland in southern province. And then, of course, this particular plant, Stematophorus moonii, in the Dipterocarpaceae family or Porra family, is unique to Wallavattu, and I'm sure all of you may know that that is again a point endemic found only in Wallavattu. And there's another plant, Mesua stylosa or Suanda, that particular the Stematophorus moonii is called Porraval, and this is Suanda. This is in the same genus as our national tree. Our national tree is Mesua ferrea, and this is Mesua stylosa. And there are only 6 mature trees in Wallavattu area, and that's all in the whole world in natural population. We have some plants in the botanical gardens, but they are all cultivated. But naturally, there are only 6 mature trees, and that's the population. Point endemic, Wallavattu. Of course, there was a stamp, issued in 2020 to again on the World Wetland Day with a photograph of Mesua silence also. We also have these kind of bogs, swamps in upcountry as well. In important place, you may remember there are with Patna grasslands. There are also the soil is boggy, and there are very interesting vegetation places like that. And you have some bamboos and also some special ferns and plants like this. This is actually our valerian. Of course, we know English valerian, but this is our valerian, Valeriana moonii, again endemic and critically endangered, only found in that area. And then there are, of course, estuaries found in places where rivers connect with the sea. And then we have these tidal fluctuations and things like that. And there the water is brackish. We have about 45 different estuaries and mangroves, which I'm sure will be, later, Professor Sampath, going into details. And we have some people say that 10,000, and I think the forestry department says more, but I think even less than that, we have real mangroves. Some people even classify old marshes also with mangroves, but on paper there are about 10,000 hectares of mangroves. There are actually 21 true mangrove species. Out of these 21 mangrove species, 10 are threatened, so about half of them are threatened. And we have lagoons, sort of brackish water, that also can harbor mangroves and mudflats, and there are 42 lagoons, and best examples are Bundala, which is a Ramsar site, and Kalametele. And we have coral reefs also, that also consist of various interesting wildlife and plants, of course. They are famous for spectacular beauty and very rich in biodiversity. And they say sometimes, this almost like a rainforest in American. It's very diverse. And we have extensive coral reefs in Gulf of Mannar, and area east, in the eastern area like Trincomalee to Kalmani, and several areas in the south, Rumassal and Ikadu. And we have seagrass beds also with very interesting seagrasses, again in Kalpitian and places like that. So those are very interesting natural vegetation types. And then there are in the wetlands, but then there are, as I mentioned, man-made, our national heritage, actually some of those. There are about 10,000 tanks and reservoirs, and the major irrigation reservoirs cover about 7,800 hectares. And the minor ones cover about 52,200 hectares. And best examples are Paratum, some of them area tank. So those are also man-made, but wetlands. And there are newly built reservoirs also. Remember, in the Mahali project and various other projects in recent times, there are a lot of newly built reservoirs came in places like Potmalay and Victoria, Rantabe, and many. Even rice fields are considered as wetlands. There's an interesting paper written by Chandra Bamaradini and Prashant Aman Singh on the rice field biodiversity, and there are interesting animals and plants. Of course, plants in rice fields are considered weeds, but there are animals which are unique to those kind of wetlands, and we have large number of wetlands, and of course, these are affected by various chemicals, and I don't want to go into details. There are various uses. We use water from wetlands for domestic supply and irrigation, and agriculture products for human consumption, medicinal herbs, raw materials like nuts and things like that, hydroelectricity, fish and crustaceans for human consumption, ornamental use, and material for religious ceremonies, offerings, recreation, and so forth. And then there are a lot of ecosystem services provided by wetlands, mitigation of floods. Of course, wetlands are in the low-lying areas. That's why they are low, but they are wetlands. The water due to gravity go into those low areas. And if you fill them, then the consequences, I'm sure, Sivandi and Sampath will tell. And then to mitigate the floods, you have to have wetlands. And then to get protection from storms and from to prevent erosion and the retention of sediments, water purification, and they actually act as carbon sink and breeding habitats for fish. And they have a unique biodiversity, as I mentioned. They are adapted to live in water, which many plants can't do. If you look at the 2012 red list, Professor Ditya Katawala did an analysis. She analyzed the aquatic plants and found that there are about 370 plant species which can be considered aquatic, including 240 flowering plants and 28 ferns and fernalies, which are generally known as tetrapites. And according to her estimates, about 41% of these wetland plants or aquatic plants are threatened. That's a serious, risk. But that was in 2012. Now, when we consider the number of threatened plants, the proportion of threatened plants in 2012, it was 44%. But when we did the 2020 red list, the percentage was 48%. That's a 4% increase. So maybe even the wetland plants, it may not be 41%, maybe more. And if you look at some charismatic wetland plants, cryptocurrine, there are 11 species of cryptocurine in this country. All 11 species are threatened. 6 are critically endangered, 3 are endangered, and 2 are vulnerable. And out of 10 Lagenandra species, now cryptocurine is called Arthurian and Lagenandra kettle. Out of 10 Lagenandra species, 8 are threatened. 1 is actually considered extinct, critically endangered, and probably extinct, not considered extinct, probably extinct. CRP, and 3 are critically endangered, and 4 are endangered. And out of 21 eriocolon species, that is motor, very beautiful plant. 14 out of 21 eriocolon species are threatened. That's about more than half. So critically endangered 5, 6 endangered species, and 3 vulnerable species. So what we can see is that there are very interesting plants, not just Muthurajavela, riverine vegetation and mountain wet grasslands, and even other types of wetlands. You go to Gundala, I'm sure you'll see photographs later. You see, they are not really the natural vegetation you are seeing. It's a totally different floristic composition. So there are so many problems, and I think probably Sampath and Sevan will deal with those things. So that's my introduction, and thank you.
Can I now invite Professor Sampath Seniorantha, please? This one?
Yeah.
This one?
Some funds are gone. Give me a second, I'll just. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. And normally, conservation action is not a very catchy title where large numbers normally won't show up. But despite the dangers, despite the can I see the screen? Possibility. If I do that, would that affect? Huh? I'll have to look at it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. That's okay. I don't know. It's there already, but I can see this. It's okay. I think it's okay as long as it works. Yeah, it's okay. All right. Sorry about that. Anyway, so thanks for coming and thank you, WNPS, for inviting. I was telling one of my students when I first got invited a few years ago. I thought that's a kind of a landmark in my work in Sri Lanka, because I was working about 12 years abroad, and so I told myself the day that WNPS invites me for a talk at BNYCH is the time that the country recognizes and values my work as a researcher. So it happened in 2019. So I was quite pleased about it. And then this is, I think, my fourth appearance here. So I don't know what that really means to me. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting. And what I'll try to do, I thought you, the audience, you value wetlands, you know about wetlands, and you care about it. That's why you are here. That's true for the Zoom audience, because we are all kind of semi-sick with Zoom, these online platforms, but you are logged in because you know the value, you care about it. So instead talking about the basics of wetlands, I thought to talk about some of the new findings and to show the connectivity in a kind of slightly different light. I spoke to about 300 sailors recently at Mannar, again in that light. So I thought it was really well received. And so that's kind of the flavor, but I will kind of have few slides at the beginning. Colombo, we all know it's a wetland. Basically, it's a wetland city, it's a Ramsar city, the only Ramsar city in South Asia. It's water, and it has really pretty, pristine, beautiful Burguda system where I live nearby. Fairly diverse. Still, you can hear the fish owls at night when it is quiet. You can see fishing cats, and so it's quite diverse. And some of Anya and others' work showed that the fishing cat is quite an interesting linkage, linking these. Let me see whether I can get the cursor control. Give me a second. I'm just trying to get my. Okay, that's okay. I can't use my. I try to use my arrow. Do you know how to do that? If I do that. Sorry, I don't know. I don't think I do not do that. Don't worry. I'll go ahead, Nathan. Otherwise, I'll do that. Okay, no, thanks. Thank you. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Then. So it's basically it's a system of it's a wetland. It's a system of wetlands connected through water and animals and plants, especially the fishing cat and.
For 2 seconds, because the Zoom audience, the slide is frozen. Can Dave fix it?
Sure.
Because the Zoom audience, the slide is frozen.
I just sit near my TV. So maybe I simply move. That's right. Where is your screen sharing and stuff? Okay, this is mine. No, not top. This is mine. If we do. Good. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Right. So anyway, I'll move forward. So I will talk about the connectivity. Connectivity is, of wetlands. It's quite. I think when I start thinking about it, it's quite remarkable when you think of a forest. Forest is a static. Forest is isolated. Forest is more of a kind of fairly established entity, while wetlands are dynamic, changing a lot, and a lot of things move through water and air. So let's see how that works. Actually, this one I just draw based on the information that we have. Sri Lanka is here. So we have connectivity from Africa, Australia, multiple routes, and then Europe, Asia. We hope by the end of our this stretch of research that we are doing right now, we might have a connectivity coming from even North America, things coming from North America detected in Sri Lanka. So wetlands are transitional, as I mentioned. The tide varies, especially if it is coastal, high tide and low tide. In certain areas, that tidal action is more pronounced, like places in Velanai, Wankale, Urumale, quite pronounced in that, and in the wet zone, because of the nature of the shore, the tidal action is not that pronounced, visible, but it's the same. And the Bay of Fundy considered has the highest tidal fluctuation in the planet. So things vary from location to location. And then the seasonality, the dry season, wet season, there's variations, especially in the mountain and high elevation wetlands. Winter and summer changes, especially when it comes to migration of birds and butterflies and all. And then the breeding and non-breeding season has quite drastic effects, especially with fish and large vertebrates. And then variability of volume of water, salinity, temperature, size and shape because of the differences in the water. Like in certain parts, especially in the north, certain islands appear in certain times of the years, certain times of the tidal activity, and with that there's more availability of dry areas, and then when the tide rises, then the availability of aquatic water areas goes up and the land reduces, so that affects the movement of animals and so on. And then the exposure of mudflats and sand dunes and so on. As Professor Cyril mentioned, I'll just move this a bit. I have two screens to deal with. I think I didn't realize Professor Cyril navigated quite smoothly. But yeah, okay. Oops. It's okay, is it? I pressed the arrow. Which one? Ah, all right, good. Right. So 40% of all species that we know globally live in or breed in wetlands. That's quite a remarkable number if you think of it, because yes, there's in boreal and polar regions there's more wetlands than tropics, but in a tropical context it's very few wetlands. So compared to other types of habitat, so naturally we all know that when you go to a wetland, you see a lot of animals and plants, and I think that is actually reflected in the global figures as well. And then this diversity actually produced. I have to move this up again. So just try to keep a kind of enough. Oh, I think I can remove this. I'll just try to hide floating. Okay, cool. Right. So this diversity of life actually reflects in its productivity and our users. I think Professor Sewandi will talk extensively on that. But simply put, less diversity in wetlands means less protein in our diet, less fish on the plate, and less interesting meal that we get globally. And that is true in Sri Lanka because we depend on wetlands extensively for our protein and other food commodities. So increasingly it's shown that even in seabirds, in marine mammals, in people, where over the past 100 or so years, the quality and the quality of food that they consume has been reducing. Animals and humans eating smaller and smaller fish and more planktonnivorous fish now than ever before, because we used to eat more carnivorous fish, larger fish, and so on. Oops. Okay, and so to get this, over 1 billion people make a living from wetlands. By the way, I'm using these wetlands, the International Wetland Day slides, and there's about 47 trillion US dollar worth of productivity there. So that's a lot of money, lot of services provided by this, more than the forests, deserts, and grasslands. So wetlands are critically important habitat for human well-being, economies to run, and the globe to function. So let's see the connectivity. Wetlands connect, and this slide shows that the left-hand side is Asha and Professor Patiarachi's work in 2014, showing how these currents move around in Sri Lanka. Since coastal waters considered wetlands, coral reefs, lagoons, bays, and river mouths, so this connectivity of fresh water with seawater, and seawater going from Sri Lankan region to Indian region and beyond, all mixing and making wetlands, even in the upland, inland wetlands, some way or another connected to the wetlands in the other systems. And I don't have the arrow. So the river systems that flows into the ocean in a kind of radial kind of all directions to from Sri Lanka makes the entire country a wetland country where reservoirs and lagoons and bays and rivers and streams all connected. And these wetlands are connected, not just water. These two examples from 2008 and 2019, two papers. One is on the left-hand side is the olive ridley turtle, where satellite tagged turtle moves from Bangladesh to eastern India down to east coast of Sri Lanka. And the right-hand panel is the green turtles, about 10 animals tagged in Rakava, moved along the southern coast and then some into Mannar, some into Lakshadweep, and then some into the west coast. So they are connected. The animals that we see in Hikkaduwa and south, like the turtles, they actually move around. This particular animation shows that a tagged leatherback turtle in Panama moving along the Caribbeans into the Atlantic. Now that's where, about a little bit north of that's where the Titanic got sunk, and then so it moved across Atlantic, this particular leatherback turtle, and soon it will reach Europe, and then down to down to Spanish coast and Portuguese waters now. So like that. So these things move. The wetlands, the beaches that this leatherback turtle breeds in Panama actually get connected with the feeding areas of it in the West African and Western European coast. Of that linkage, birds are more prominent because about 2,500 species of birds globally move. These arrows indicate their movement long distance across the globe, and most of these movements are facilitated by wetlands, because wetlands, since they have a higher productivity, the wetlands act as the fueling stations, refueling, recharging stations for these birds to migrate. And if you can see that the globe is changing its color, that is the summer and the winter months. When the north get green, that means it's the summer, and then the birds are there, and then when it gets whiter, they all started to come down, and Sri Lanka is there in the panel as well. Anyway, of that, there's a very pretty video of white storks from Europe moving to Africa. You can see that some of them go through Gibraltar, some of them go through Gaza Strait, and some goes through Sahara. They migrate south in the autumn, and then they'll spend the winter there, back to where they are. But these are different white storks and European, and they thousands of them, millions of them. So some of them connect, some of the wetlands in the poles connect with the southern wetland, Antarctic poles. These birds, these Arctic terns, travel about 50,000 kilometers in a trip, and during its entire life, they travel about the distance from the Earth to the Moon and back about 3 times. So all these wetlands are connected. Remember, they travel quite fast. So the signatures, the nitrogen signature, the fish that they eat in the Arctic can get deposited. Some aspects, the feathers, the heavy metals can transport it all the way across the globe to either poles. So the pollutants and the things that get accumulated can deposited in very different locations. Like that, there's 8 major flyways across the globe. We are in the Central Asian flyway, and Sri Lanka is very important. As I mentioned, these wetlands connect, and through wetlands, we are connected to the rest of the world. We study that. I will show you some of our recent findings as maps to show the connectivity. We put tags, satellite tags for different species. Here they are all some way or another wetland species, from ducks to gulls to terns to smaller medium-sized shorebirds to large shorebirds. And those trackers, satellite trackers, actually tell us where they go, how far they fly, and how high they fly, when they sleep, and so on. So when the data is received, we can see in the left-hand side, you can see that this red shank. Oops, actually, I'll again remove this. Hide. So the red shank, this particular bird actually moves in the middle of the wetland during daytime, and then the blue lines show what they do at night. And then in the right-hand panel shows that The red dots are during its low tide, where it feeds, and the blue dots show where it feeds in the high tide. So high tide, it has to stick to the high ground because the water levels are higher, but in the low tide, it moves and feeds in the middle of the mudflat. This is at Urumale, the Talimena area. This is another example of a duck using the Wankale, Veditalatiu, and Irukalampindi wetlands and Korakulam wetlands in Mana. You can see that daily it sleeps in Irukalampindi, feeds mostly in Wankale, and then it makes a trip to Korakulam, probably for fresh water, and to Veditalatiu. So these wetlands, through these birds, are heavily connected. You can't save these species, you can't have these wetlands functioning normally by only having a part of it. Another example, this case crab plover, it uses in the right left-hand panel, you can see the Adams Bridge National Park, and they fly across Mana Island to Wankale, Irukalampindi, and then some of them goes to Iranatiu, north of this system, which is not protected. All our tag birds in Mana, one way or another, stay at least a day in Iranatiu. And then they some go to Jaffna, but they use these 3 or 4 protected areas and the matrix in between in a regular basis. This is kind of a summation of that crab plovers flying in the Mana. I'm showing this. This is where the wind farms. This is where the new economic zones. This is where the new projects proposed. We'll talk about it in the next section. And overall, this is how these wetlands in the northwestern coast connected to the wetlands in the south, wetlands in Kalpitia, Putlam area, and then Mana, and also wetlands in the east coast of India. Like the green patch up in the top is the Point Kalima. It's a large wetland complex in India. And then our wetlands in Mana connected to high alpine wetlands in Tibet. This bird, this brown-headed gull, traveled from Mana to Jaffna, and then it flew over 18,000 feet and crossed Himalayas. This is the 4th documented instance of a bird species crossing Himalayas. And this is the smallest bird, lowest weight bird with the lowest weight that's known to fly across Himalayas. And it bred in 22,000 feet elevation wetlands in Tibet, where the mold, the ice when it get melted, thawed in the summer, it creates wetlands, and that's where they breed. And another example, 2 birds, Maniki and Mega, Heuglin gulls, they flew 8,000 kilometers across Eurasia to reach Arctic Sea, and it bred in Yamal Peninsula in Arctic Sea, and overwinter in Mana in Indian Ocean. So across the oceans, it crossed the Eurasian continent, and overall 19,500 kilometers. So the top figure is the Yamal Peninsula in summer, the bottom one is Mana in summer. And this is how the Yamal Peninsula look like in Arctic, where reindeer herders are there, and in the winter they're kind of people herders and kind of shepherds are there. So the people there see these birds and the wetlands the same way in the Mana. The person in front of that Karavalawadia or the dry fish stall, the lady processing that fish would see the same thing as the lady in that reindeer herd in that picture. So amazingly, people across the globe from tropics to poles connected through these elements. And this is a kind of a summary where we have Arctic connection to Arctic, our wetlands connected to Arctic, and then our wetlands connected to Himalayas, our wetlands connected to China and to Australia, to Madagascar, and so we are fairly well connected. Coming back quickly to Colombo, so these wetlands in Colombo, Anya Ratnaik and her colleagues showed that, showing that how this matrix is used by this elusive cat at night, and how well they are connected. Even you can see them in near BMICH actually, the golf course and the wetlands near the University of Colombo, they've been recorded. So with that, I will stop. We have Colombo has a kidney and a lung. The kidney is the Bolgoda and the Diavanna wetland system, which filters water and preserve our ocean and provides breeding grounds for many animals. Our lung is the forest found in the edge of the province. So this lung and kidney basically keeps the clean air and clean water of Colombo. With that, I will stop. I think I took a little bit longer. There were some technical things. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sampad. And now I invite Professor Jayapodi. No, big screen.
Thank you, WNPS, for inviting me. And I also thank the previous speakers for setting the stage. So I'm going to talk about wetlands and man. And there's no any discrimination here by saying man. When I say man, it's all of us human beings. Wetlands and man. Now, Professor Cyril and Professor Sampath set the stage for me by talking about what the wetlands are and who lives there and all that. I'm going to talk about wetlands and its association with man. But before we go there are a few things I want to set very clear. Because whenever we talk about planet Earth in solar system, we talk about it as a blue planet, which gives us the notion that it's full of water. I just want to make sure that we are all very much aware. You know, although it's a blue planet, it's not a lot of water. Of that water, fresh water is very much a small amount. And of that, what is found in the surface is so small that you can't even see there. It's such a tiny dot. And if I'm to look at it this way, you can see that though wetlands connect us, that the water that is available for us as fresh water and also surface water in rivers and lakes are such a scarce thing. So that's why we really need to pay attention to wetlands and also pay attention to water. But at the same time, just like every other animals, humans can't live without water. That's why wetlands are so important. You can see some of the statistics, even the bones require water. And that's the connection that we have with water, thus with the wetlands. So having said that, I would like to talk about wetlands and the connection of wetlands with man from a different angle. Every time you have a river basin, every time you have what I call the headwaters to the depositional zone, that's your coastal line, you're talking about different elements. So in science, whenever you see this picture, you talk about fluxes, energy fluxes, sediment fluxes, even the lateral movement of species. But along with that also exists the connection of the man. From the headwaters to the depositional zone, we are graded as different cultures, different societies, different livelihoods because of our association with wetlands. Now, in order to talk about it, I would like to portray wetlands as important things for humans because they create civilizations, they keep our connectivity, provides us livelihood, and most importantly, they give us lots of opportunities. All the services that they render are so important for man. So I love telling stories. So I thought today to talk about wetlands and man, I'm going to bring in some characters that are known to me from my traveling here and there, and you're going to meet them too. And I'm going to talk about the importance of wetlands and the civilizations by taking you all the way from here, from BMICH to the Dimbulagar. So over there, you see Mahaveli River on the other side, and the Panbillu are just down there. And then you see Dimbulagar Mountains. Now here in this Dimbulagar Mountains, I'm very sure most of you have been there. I'm talking about this one side of Dimbulagar Mountains, which is fairly rocky, fairly arid, where you really don't expect civilization to thrive. However, it's in here that you see this Namal Pokuna temple ruins, but the history goes further back, where history talks about Yakure tribe living in a citadel in this arid rock. And what's the secret behind it? The secret is simple, and it's still visible if you happen to be there. It's this fresh water that comes from the springs that have enabled people to create such a thriving civilization out of nowhere on a rocky outcrop. And that's the beauty of wetlands. So wetlands create civilizations, and that's something that we all have to remember. Whether it is a river, whether it is a man-made reservoir, they have all helped us to live and create civilizations. So from there, rivers, wetlands connect us. Whether it is in the montane zone, or whether it is coming to the middle course of a river, they connect us. While it allows all the sediments to flush, while it allows animals to move here and there, it creates opportunities. And that's why along with the river, with the gradients of the river, you also have different cultures, people living along with it. And we have to be very mindful about these things because these are very subtle connections. And the moment you tend to ignore such subtle connections, you break the system, just like what you see here in Sitawaka, in Sitawaka. Now, what you see is a weir that has been constructed according to the EIA and the Central Environmental Authority's regulations. That big pipe should operate because that's the pipe that has been designed to provide the what we call e-flow, environmental flow, that is required to keep the river alive. But you can see it's shut and there's a small pipe that gushes out water. Whom are we cheating? We are cheating the mankind because we are forgetting that wetlands are part of us and wetlands and us are connected. So from there, let's move to the middle course of the river. I work at WNPS University, and to me, the closest river is so much associated with your day-to-day curd. Every time you buy a pot of curd, you never think about the amount of clay that is taken to make these curd pots and whether it is a sustainable industry itself. And there are communities that have lived for thousands of years along this river, But at the same time, in recent years, what we are seeing is along Mahair, people moving out. If you pay attention to this Google map, what you are actually seeing is all those black spots are abandoned clay pits. There's not enough clay now, not enough sediments now. Area is getting abandoned. As a result, what you are seeing is these kind of clay pits, which are a real health hazard from mosquitoes to everything. But at the same time, what you are also seeing is the breaking of the connectivity of the people with wetlands. We have to be very mindful about these things. Professor Cyril very clearly indicated, unlike every other country, here in Sri Lanka, there is something quite interesting. Our relationship with wetlands is not just with the natural wetlands. It's also with man-made wetlands. Every time, whether it is a seasonal reservoir or a perennial reservoir, whether it is 2,000 or 3,000 years old, along with that, we have created a civilization, a group of people living in harmony. As long as these reservoirs are thriving, healthy, and that they function properly, you are not just seeing them serving for paddy, but you are also seeing serving for communities around that. That's the relationship between us and the wetland. Professor Cyril was talking about wetlands and gave the definition. According to Ramsar, our paddy fields are also a type of wetland. And that's something that we have to also remember when we deal with them. So every river, at the end of the day, with its heavy load of sediment, ends up in the river mouth, normally an estuary. And it's in here you meet some interesting people and their connections with wetlands. Every time when there's mangroves and seagrasses, in this muddy environment, there's another relationship with the wetlands and the man. And they are very fascinating. And that's where I met Mala with her grandson, teaching the grandson how to feel the mud to look for shrimp. And the jokes they were cracking in this environment and how happily she was showing me her shrimp. It's the relationship that we need to remember every time we deal with wetlands. And this is where I also met Metropolis, someone who came to work with us. For him to start with, mangroves were just the forest, but now he and other boy that works with us can identify some of the mangroves, and they are now learning what's happening. And it's interesting. But for Metropolis, who has gone up to A levels, his life revolves around this wetland. Like his father, he goes to look for crabs. And that's the relationships that we need to remember and ensure that whenever we work with wetlands, that we treat them gently, because that's a line of people from the top to the bottom until they end up in the sea that live with the opportunities that are there. Sorry. We also tend to forget, most of the time when we talk about wetlands, we look at fish, because that's what we common us say. But in the wetlands, there are lots of other relationships. Here's fishermen that have come to fish in an island. Their main diet during this period is Indian backwater oyster. And that is the connectivity that I'm talking about. And we need to be very mindful about these things. But are we really mindful about these things? Not going to delve in, but this is the kind of tragedies that you see associated with the wetland, with the man. On broad daylight, going ahead and illegally sand mining. This is off Kalawaya in 2018, as I remember. And this poison bottle, though I detected it in a mangrove, it certainly didn't originate there. For hundreds of kilometers, it has traveled along with every other junk that you see is now in mangroves. And this is the relationship with us and the wetlands now. And that's why it's important to have discussions like this. Metmal looks for crabs here, but for the last 6-7 years, I am seeing from my own eyes how these islands are fast vanishing because of erosion. So recently when I was there, some people asked me why. I am clueless. I don't know. But this is exactly what's happening. And that's why we need to be very careful with wetlands, because wetlands and man are well connected. Our civilizations have started with the wetlands, and we have to thrive with the wetlands. As long as wetlands are sustainable, they will feed us, they'll take care of us, and they'll entertain us. And that's something that we have to always remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sevandi. Our next, we will be having the three speakers speak about the problems wetlands are facing, as well as solutions and ways to better manage our wetland habitat. So can I please invite Professor Cyril Vijayasundara?
Okay, yeah, I'm again, and I'll make it short. Of course, Professor Sevandi mentioned a lot about the human angle in a very literary way. And I'll briefly tell you what are the major factors affecting wetlands. One is land reclamation and filling. Of course, Sri Lanka is a very strange country. We even have a land reclamation corporation. In Sinhala, it's called Pahatbim Godagirimi Mandale. So it's legal to reclaim wetlands. In fact, when it was, I remember it was in 1948 when this was declared, and in 2006 it was kind of amended to make it a little bit more decent. But then originally the idea was to reclaim areas in Colombo, low-lying areas in Colombo, so that you can fill and construct houses and various things. I remember those senior people might remember how it was like Maligaon area and all that. So there are various reclamations of wetlands, filling and all that, and then what happens? Those wetlands are filled, low-lying areas are filled. You have floods in Colombo. Even in Varakapola, in Colombo, most of the roads are flooded. When there's rain in front of the general hospital, flooded. Flower Road and various things in various places flooded because wetlands are filled. And then, of course, clearing of vegetation is common. And then in this piece, I'll deal with it later. And then a lot of pollution is happening, and most of the factories, in the wetland nearby areas, they just dispose their pollutants to the rivers. Big companies, even blue chips companies, they just discharge their waste into the rivers. And then sewage disposal, garbage we go to Candy Lake. There's a lot of garbage disposed to Candy Lake. And then area is the same. And then of course, Professor Sevandi showed dam in Sitavak area. And then there are a lot of diversions. Not just hydropower, there are various diversions. Even Somavati, Villu, and all the Mahavali flood waters and all these are diverted, and then a lot of damage being done. And then of course, extraction of water for irrigation. Sometimes, some highland areas, some people may not realize that when you draw a lot of water from the low areas, the water table goes down. So that can even cause forest dieback. Hypothesis, but there are a lot of things happening, because of the draining of water too much, indiscriminate use of water for irrigation. And then of course mining. Now, if you go to Dazuru or any place, there are a lot of sand mining by the Mahavali, a lot of sand mining, and there's no authority to look into this regulate sand mining. We had a symposium once, and then I asked who's under whose authority comes the riverbanks and sand mining. No one takes the responsibility. DFSMB, the irrigation department says it's not their responsibility. Mahavali says it's not their responsibility. There's no one to look after the riverbanks, and there are a lot of sand mining. The government itself is constructing buildings in the riverbanks and the river reservations. The irrigation ordinance is is ignored and violated without any second thought. So there's a lot of things happening, especially on riverbanks when it comes to sand mining and everything. And then, of course, on top of that, we have something to blame. Those days it was the open economy. Now we blame climate change. There are a lot of things happening because of the climate change. The background thing, I don't want to go in detail because we all are aware of climate change. And of course, the wetlands are actually having some mitigating kind of action because they are carbon sinks and they absorb carbon dioxide and sequester carbon. That's good side of it also. But then, due to the impact of climate change, when these sinks are wet, and then when the climate is hot, or when there's global warming and things like that, a lot of impacts. But when you go to wetlands, this is Bundala, by the way. Do you see local plants? No. All what you see are all exotic plants. Now, if you want to see, or if you want to at least read about the plants that are in wetland, read Sandeshakavi. Say various Sandeshakavi, Sally Sandeshe, Gita Sandeshe, Mayur Sandeshe, Tisara, Nilokobo Sandeshe, Kahuru Sandeshe, and all that. Always they talk about bit of exaggeration is also there, but then it's based on the habitat, wetlands. Suddenly, if you read, I don't want to go into it because I'll start reading this poem. So there it says, this describes the rich vegetation. Before Lorenzo de Almeida came to Sri Lanka in 1505, we had local plants in the wetlands. Now, when you go to wetlands, this is what you see, right? Diyavannawa or this Jawardhanpura was a totally different scenario those days. So after the European invasions, everything was changed. A lot of exotic plants came in, and this is Bundala, and this is Parakkam Samudra. In fact, soon after 2015, there was this situation, and we were called. I'm a co-chair of the National Invasive Species Specialist Group, and myself and Professor Buddhimarambe. And we too were called by the top and go and look at this Parakkam Samudra in Polonnaruwa. You know by whom, right? Polonnaruwa. So then we saw that this is the situation. So this is a wetland, and then these are affected. And then, of course, the particular plant which was causing this problem was Iconia crassipes, so was the water hyacinth, Japan Jabarin single, which was brought from Hong Kong by Lady Blake, wife of the Governor Blake, in 1905, and he has given it to one of my predecessors, Traits, who was the director at Royal Botanical Gardens, and Lady Blake has given that plant to Traits, and he planted it in the garden. And the following year, it was found in a well in Vateo. And then next year, it was in Chilau, and then some place in Tangul, and it was going all over the place. And then in 1909, a separate ordinance was enacted. That was the water hyacinth ordinance, and that is to control this particular plant. That was the first piece of legislation that was a precursor to the Plant Protection Act. And then, of course, we have the other aquatic invasive plant, Salvina molesta. In fact, it was introduced by the University of Colombo in the early 40s. Not to do any harm to the ecosystems, but it was actually this is a fern. And for botanical studies, it was brought to the University of Colombo for a special class, and then it came out of that. And then, of course, we have this famous Andona glabra or vellata, and that was I'm going to do some part here. Okay, right. And then this is also causing a lot of problems in the coastal, western coastal areas in marshes. And in fact, the problem is that if you try to remove this vellata, wholesale. So entire eradication of this vellata, I'm sure Professor Edwards, everyone they would tell you, this will also cause a lot of that. So now the wildlife has, found, made some relationships with these plants. Now, if you totally remove them, that will also, have an impact on the wildlife. So yeah, in a precarious situation there. And then, of course, we have. Okay. And then, it's not moving. All right. Okay. Thank you. So then we have Typha angustifolia, Eurasian plant, Ambupang. It's also health hazard in Bungalow. Is one of the top invasives. And we have Hydrilla verticillata. Originally, it was an aquarium plant, but now it's causing a lot of problems in Mahavali water, especially canals and places like that. And then this is a recent invasive, Myriophyllum aquaticum. It was actually brought into Sri Lanka and as an aquarium plant. And now our thing is, problem with our people is that when they have aquarium fish or aquarium plants, when those things get out of control, being, good Buddhists, we don't kill or set fire to plants. So we just deliver them into a nearby lake or something. All these fish and all these plants. So now in the Western province, it's becoming a big problem in some areas. And this is another plant. Same. These are only very, very recent plant introduction. Like during the last 2-3 decades, Mayaca fluvidalis again is now causing a lot of problems in the suburban wetlands near Colombo. And then Ludwigia sedoides, same. This was not a very, very old invasive plant, very, very recent, maybe maximum 20 years or so ago, this was introduced, and now this is also causing problems. I introduced some of these plants into a lake in the botanical gardens, and then within no time, the entire lake was filled with this, and all other plants were, eradicated by this plant. Then, of course, I removed that. So this is happening by accident. If you introduce them into the native wetlands, this will take over this thing and the vegetation, and then nothing else but this will grow. And about 3-4 years back, I was contacted by the Director General of Irrigation, and he told me that there's a big problem in Mahakandara in Anuradhapura. And we went there and found that this particular plant was growing. This is a submerged plant and causing a lot of problems. And in fact, what actually happened was that the wife of the Pradeshiya Sabhapati, or chairman, has complained this to his husband, and then only he took serious action and he contacted. Otherwise, he didn't take it seriously. When wife says, "I can't, have this thing," and so the Pradeshiya Sabha chairman contacted the irrigation department and irrigation some other political people, and the Director General of Irrigation informed me and asked, "What is this?" When I went there, I found it was Nayas marina. So Nayas marina is actually a marina. It's a coastal plant. It is normally found in the coastal areas in estuary and vegetation. But this is inland in the north central province. And this is the first time we found that submerged in the Mahakandara, the entire lake was invaded by this particular plant. But then we had a meeting. The villagers came and they were coming with various ideas, and one villager came and gave a very valid reason how this came to Mahakandara. He said usually during the pilgrim season, the Navy is having a boat service. So when they brought boats from various places into this, he said that those people are bringing boats from coastal areas, and probably part of that would have got caught in the pedals, and then that's quite possible. So anyway, now you find these kind of marine plants also, or coastal plants also in the north central province lake. So these are serious problems. Now, as I mentioned, most of these wetlands you go, you don't see the native plants. All are occupied by exotic plants. And there should be somebody or someone who should do something to clean these places and also to somehow protect or prevent these kind of things entering into our wetlands, and there should be some serious action. So this is a serious thing. We only talk about this reclamation and other thing, but this is my line. I always, like Sampath talked to us about bird drinking and all that. So invasive plants is very serious, that I should say. And probably in the discussion we can talk about it a little bit more. And then more than anything, we have to change the attitudes of people. I think a lot of people think that wetlands are wastelands. Wetlands are not wastelands. And then even the general public thinks that it's a wasteland. Policymakers, of course, don't have to talk about them too much, but only scientists are aware that wetlands are important. So these, scientists told us, Professor Sampath and Professor Gandhi and all the others say that wetlands are important, and that's why we are here. So it's a scientific, community's idea. But then when it comes to general public or the policymakers, they think that it's a wasteland. So that's the attitude we have to, change. And without changing that attitude, we will not be able to do anything. Thank you.
All right. So, all right, I thought everybody might be a bit bored. So this particular notion actually comes from us when we work in the wetland. Increasingly, when we work in the middle of the water, there's very little access to the dry land because there's fencing and some fence or something blocking the land from the water. And when you are in the land, in the dry lands, it's very difficult to go into the water. I think the ones who were at the WNPS trip would realize that we try to catch that injured shoveler. We have to go fairly like a kind of a different route to get into the water. And all the animals and probably even plants would find this the issue that we are increasingly blocking this water and land interface in these wetlands. I think the very essence of wetland conservation is to protect that interface of water and land, and also to re-establish if it is broken. I have few slides, not a lot, very general. Mostly animal oriented. I'm not talking about invasive species. I knew Professor Cyril will talk about it, but obviously he's an expert on plants, but I'm no expert on invasive animals. So I will talk about more general animal related issues. Since I'm pretty sure most people would open to hear, let's talk about linear infrastructure. Development. Mostly we say development, we mostly talk about linear infrastructure and mega projects, in different forms, but like wind farms, power lines, highways, roads, large canals, all these falls into this category. This particular map in the background are the summation of movement of tagged birds that we have so far in Mana. It shows that the birds fly across these Tambavani windmills. Why there's fewer lines up north of the island? Simply that we haven't done much tagging. So soon it will get filled. There's our observations suggest that there's more birds definitely using the central and the northern sides of the island. But as I showed in different maps, the western part of the Mannar Islands wetlands are heavily connected to the eastern part of the Mannar Islands wetlands, as well as the Jaffna wetlands, Indian wetlands, and so on. So this whatever we do in between would affect this movement. And if no point of protecting a plant or an animal or a population in a protected area if you kill it daily or if you disturb it daily in between, because these life forms move around. But unfortunately, the protection is not great. In the right hand side, lower right hand side is the map of Mannar with the power plants and the wind turbines and the power lines and all, which is not very clear. But the point is that these are all mega projects, linear structure goes across, and are they really disturbing life? The answer is yes and no. Yes, because if in this particular context, bats and birds and even probably butterflies and anything that flies, if they are in that particular zone of this, in this case windmills, it can, if it is a power line, then it's a different one, but again the same thing. If it is another like a wall or a factory, again the strike zone matters, and the duration, how often that it crossed that zone, as well as how often it reached that particular window. And then we know that even despite all these disturbances, even in Colombo, life thrives. Life finds a way to kind of negotiate. One way of, in this case, in windmills, they negotiate it simply by avoiding it. I think that is what happening in Puttlam and in Jaffna. Windmills are birds and other animals tend to avoid. Another issue would be the visibility, like the way, the perception of in this case birds to windmills. Certain birds, certain species, certain groups of birds have particular way of their eyes located. They are more adapted to look down, so they don't see up. So that when the blade comes from the top, they have no sense of it coming. And such species are more vulnerable than the species that have eyes projecting towards the front. So they can see the moving blade. And remember, the blade moves about 160 kilometers per hour. The tip of the blade is quite fast, even though you don't see it out from a distance. So, so how they avoid it is through vision. But some species are better at doing it. Some species are, or some groups are very poor doing it. Anyway, so that depends of their perception. And then the larger species are more vulnerable. They are less agile. They are mostly high flying. So they soar near, or they move, or they fly near these turbines, especially in the windy conditions. And so the larger the species, the more vulnerable they are than the smaller fast-flying species. And then the effects of this, like for example, like people ask, are these windmills kill birds? I've seen only one kill so far. That came from one of our informants from Mannar 2 days ago. A Brahmani kite, a dead Brahmani kite. Is that only that? No, probably there might be scavengers, dogs, other Brahmani kites now used to get the dead animals in the morning from the thing. So, but would that be a problem? We don't know, because one animal could get killed in roads, in your vehicle, in your window. Would that affect the population? The population level mortalities are the ones that everybody has to be worried about. And that is higher when the animal is rare. So if an animal is critically endangered, probably the numbers are very low. So even 1 or 2 kills would be a significant dent. as Professor Cyril said, only 8 trees in that particular species in that flooded forest. So a single, like a falling branch would be a bit of a concern, as opposed to another species that has thousands of individuals. So larger the species, the problem, the lower the numbers can be a concern. Manna has critically endangered species. Manna has globally threatened species, so things can go wrong. And then so that way you can assess. So how you prevent this? The solution is this. Sorry, I'll remove this. The solution is this sensitivity mapping. Britain have done that. What you do, you have this the maps of species of birds and bats and butterflies and anything that moves in those zones, and so you map the landscape in terms of the risk level, the perception of the species, and then you identify no-go zones and green zones. Have we done in Sri Lanka? No, like sand mining in the riverbanks. I mean, these things has to be done since we are entering into alternate energy, green energy. Green can be only green if it doesn't kill animals. And even this is done in Africa. Parts of Africa now, World Bank have done sensitivity mapping for wind energy and solar energy. Asia got a project, but Sri Lanka is not included in it. India is included. Roads are the second biggest biodiversity killer or natural killer in the planet. Six times the road network of this planet had increased 6 folds over the past 1.5 decades. I think we all agree, even in Sri Lanka, you don't see a gravel road any longer, right? It's all concrete or paved, one form of another. So these are actually affecting, and since wetlands are considered wastelands in the public eye, the natural path to take when road or infrastructure development is through the wetland. As you can see, I'm not commenting too much about this. I think there's a court case also there. The Talangam wetland system, as an example, I'm putting it here. So if you go the red zone, there's this many houses get affected. If you go green zone, which is the highly sensitive the environmentally sensitive Talangam environmental protection zone. If you go there, no house get affected, even though you are affecting the last natural wetland community in the city, but you can get a road done with less worries in the public eye. So but the problem would be then when the wetland get the road becomes the wetland, as you can see in the many parts of Colombo and elsewhere. So these are affecting across the landscape in all different habitat types. Wetlands are seriously affected in tropics because the size of wetlands are smaller, and the roads would really stop the drainage, affect the drainage. Great examples were there in the dry zone recently because of the newly developed road network. Now there's more floods because the drainage has been affected in the dry zone. Encroachment, I think probably for protected areas, it's the biggest issue. These are examples from Manna. As you can see, these ponies can't get into the land, and this is the only sizable freshwater body, Fulham in Manna. So it's very difficult for them to get there. That's ponies and buffaloes here, but that's true for all other animals. A lot of injuries. We started to see lots of injuries in Manna in animals, in not just birds, in other animals as well, due to plastic pollution, encroachment, and barbed wire fences, and broken glass, broken metal. It's getting very, very hard because since wetlands are normally the lowest point in the landscape, naturally debris tend to accumulate, and that affects different ways, including contamination of the food web. And the destruction and pollution. As I start talking, this is examples from Muthurajavela. As you can see, widespread legal and illegal encroachment, disposal of garbage. I didn't talk about, I didn't add any slides on express pearl issue, but all these, since the water is connected, wetlands are connected, even inland wetlands, these pollutants would affect. And then 40% of life that we know of, and most of the sources of maritime food web linked to wetlands, the contamination, pollution that you see in wetlands would resonate in the different levels of food web, and we are part of the food web. We are part of the marine food web. We are one of the major consumers, predator of a higher levels of the marine food web. So whatever you deposit in that process, I want to show that the poison bottle that got disposed into the water, either we drink as drinking water, because we drink, or we all of us drink water from rivers, or from a well, or from a tube well, from a bottled water company. They all in the natural water source table. We either drink there. If we miss there, it will go into an animal, and then eventually it would come back to us as fish or shrimp, with a magnified, amplified levels, because biomagnification is a problem where we being a predator and a higher level carnivore, the effects would be harder, and we live longer, so we can compared to a short-lived animal, the effects would be drastic. So hunting and destruction of extraction of resources in an unsustainable manner is an issue. Hunting, you would think it's not a big issue. No, it is a big issue. Even in Colombo, I don't know whether you know lapwing eggs, Kerala Vittara. It's been collected as food, and with the economic downturn, these effects will be higher and magnified. And the top right-hand side is a dugong. It's a victim of dynamite. Dynamite is a problem in coastal waters in Sri Lanka, especially in the northern sector. And then the other ones were different traps, and the one in the middle of that guy actually is a trapper who set traps, and we managed to caught. But that is a common practice in most parts of the country. Dogs and cats, they kill not just birds, marine mammals, freshwater mammals, as well as fish, all life forms. Invertebrates, they have severe effects in certain parts, even in the protected areas. Deep in the Wilpattu, for example, deep in Wasgamua, you see dogs. Finally, can we strike a balance between development, pollution, encroachment, and having green cities and cleaner wetlands? Yes, but it needs information, data, it needs action, it needs commitment, and also it needs a little bit of intelligence as a nation, as a community, and as individuals. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. I need to stop.
I'll try to be mighty quick because I'm eating into your dinner. So, however, I think the real end is here in all these things. Do we have a tomorrow for wetlands? I say there are thousands of possibilities, and it's a matter of looking at these possibilities. I just want to very quickly take you through some of the possibilities for which you all can contribute. So coming to possibilities, this slides are not changing. Slides are not changing. Thank you. I just came up with 10 points of possibilities. One of the most important things when it comes to possibilities is to understand the river continuum. That river is a connected system, and accordingly, we have to think about the development. As I mentioned earlier, any disturbance, undue disturbance in one place is going to affect everything else. Here is a picture that very clearly shows what is happening to most of our rivers today. Do you know the amount of kilometers our rivers are running in tunnels, but not in the river proper, where even the e-flow is not provided regularly, especially during dry season. But that's exactly one solution that we need, to think about river as a continuum system, and a lateral flow is important, and then accordingly treating it. Second thing, stakeholders, all of you. Stakeholders, more the merrier. We need more stakeholders to work with us about wetlands, because without stakeholders, you can't do it. When it comes to stakeholders, they can come from many different angles. So you have here an example where WNPS itself is linked, restoration of a mangrove site. You can see from one side Sri Lanka Navy at the moment doing some contour mapping, helping us with a skill that we don't have. From the other side, my dear friend Dr. Malik, giving all this expertise guidance for the youth, how to do the business correctly. And also youth themselves, who are passionate, who want to learn, who want to study. And in the very middle, you can see the private sector working with the villages, because at the end of the day, I'm talking about a place where 2021 Wetland Day celebrations were held, and from the chief guest to the Director General of Wildlife Conservation was asked to leave. There was a protest. And this year, Department of Wildlife Conservation, WNPS, private sector, us, all of us went together and helped the shrimp farmers to afforestate their shrimp farms, to come up with mangroves in their shrimp farms. Stakeholders creating the right connectivity is the way forward for wetlands. That's the second way forward I see. Intersectoral linkages are the third possibility. Why intersectoral linkages? Because intersectoral linkages are very clearly mentioned here. What is this? It's what I call the water, energy, food nexus. These three are very connected, and unless we understand that balance and work together, we are not going to see a way forward for our wetlands. And that is very well explained here with some facts, and that you understand, unless we have a management of energy, food and water, we are not going to see a future for our wetlands. So we have to look at this water, energy, food nexus very seriously. And tied to that are the strategic environmental assessments. For every development, the time has come for us to work out what should be the way forward, strategic environmental assessment. And that will also make us understand what to leave aside, because certain things that we considered as useless, now we are looking at them as ways to earn money, ways to trade. For an example, the blue carbon ecosystems, salt marshes, seagrasses, and mangroves, they are going to be the future goal of the world. So strategic environmental assessments are very, very important. Well, I think it is time for us to think about the polluter pays principle, because it can't go on. If you happen to be the polluter, there can't be a second person going ahead and paying for it. And it is also the fact that I want to make it very clear here that constant beach cleaning is not the way forward for our wetlands. Every beach cleaning ends up carrying more polythene. So polluter pays principle is something that we have to think seriously and have regulations and take forward to. Precautionary approach. Why precautionary approach is important? Let me tell you why. Maybe I don't want to tell you why. You see it. So from 1956 to 2010, you can see how we are losing our forest cover. Along with the forest cover, what you are also losing is our wetlands. And what is seen here is the projections for the future development. And they are going to go through all our wetlands, whether it is rivers, reservoirs, whatever. And that's exactly why it's important to have a precautionary approach. Let me also emphasize you why it is important. This came up with a study that I'm involved with at the moment, looking at the environmentally sensitive areas of this country, for which Professor Cyril is also a part. Our climate experts came up with this map, and that's not a good map. Heart of the country, the mountain areas are indicated as high vulnerable areas for drought intensity. If you happen to be living in the middle elevation or coastal elevation, you are okay. But what happens if our highlands become drought intensive? And that's why it's important to have the precautionary approach. Act now, because if we don't act now, I don't think we'll be able to have a future for our wetlands. Number 7, application of valuation to decision making. This is so important. Let me also explain to you using the cloud forests. Forests about 1,500, which are very important for us, basically because they are the heart or the lung that creates rain. And the map here, although it's not very clear, shows you where this mountain forest or the cloud forest is. For the entire country, it's in that tiny area and also on the top of Knuckles. And if you look at the other side in the map, you can see whatever that is given in gray is already protected. But even in there, you can see other land uses. Now, this is where we have to put a real value to the land and work out what is the best decision. Are we to develop it and kill all our river systems, or are we to give a better value to these lands here from the TS states to think of new management so that we have a new value to the wetlands as well as to the cloud forest? Very important this thing, because we do have government sector. Yes, I do agree, but very few people to analyze and monitor big data. Let me explain it to you. Central Environmental Authority to many other agencies will get involved for project approving, and a project is established in any river or whatever. But who then monitors it? Here's a classic example. So whoever builds that pier is thinking with that fish ladder, that fish walk. You can see that, right? Why can they get away with these kind of blunders? Because there's no one to monitor. Even I can't walk over that fish ladder. Then how can a fish do that? That's exactly why I say we need more people to monitor and to evaluate big data. Yeah. 9, protect first, restore concurrently. Don't forget the power of protection for our wetlands. Here's a good example. Vilpattu at Kalawaya river mouth. The protected area, southern boundary of Vilpattu. Because it's already a declared protected area, you can see the pristineness of the wetland and the associated forest. here's the other side, which is other state forest. See the contrast. And we talk a lot about restoration, but I always say that's the second thing. Protect what you have. Stand to protect what we call as protected area. Every time when you talk about degasting, remember you are going to lose the lung of this country. And that's something we should never allow to happen. Because restoration is not easy. There's a lot to learn and it's a scientific process. It's not your weekend going to a protected area or a fun area, plant in a tree and come in. It's more complex than that. Please remember that. And finally, my plea to all of you, please don't be a part of the blame squad or the try squad. Don't tell me that you're trying. Do it. And more than anything, self-audit yourself. Because at the end of the day, you can blame any government. You can blame any government, any politician. But what is your contribution? Have you ever thought about the water footprint, the amount of grey water that you might be releasing? Did you ever look at the water that is required for your ordinary cup of coffee or tea? Have you thought about it? Every time you do shopping, have you thought about the amount of water that is required to produce a denim and a t-shirt? And that 20,000 liters of water can be consumed within a course of 6 to 7 years. So before you give the blame to someone else, think what you can do. And for the wetlands, at the end of the day, all this got to be taken very seriously if we are to reverse the trend. And that trend got to be reversed, and that's important because we have only one blue planet, and that's where we live. Unless you think with the technology that we can bring another planet, but then be careful with the current trend, it can also be reserved by Elon Musk. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Professor Cyril, Professor Sampath, and Professor Sevandi for that powerful and enthralling lecture. I would like to open the floor to some questions now. We will have a roaming mic. So if you do have a question, can I ask you to please lift your hand? And we will also take some questions from Zoom. So yeah, we can first open the floor to the audience. Yeah. Okay, in the meantime, I will get to Professor Cyril with one of the questions that have come in from Zoom. Can you elaborate on the hybridization between invasive and native species of wetland plants and the impact that it's having on the ecosystem? We need a headcover.
That's a good question. There are not that much evidence research done, but there's at least one study done by again Professor Ditya Akadavala and her husband Professor Kapila Akadavala, and they have found some hybridization between our national flower, Nymphia nauchelli, and other exotic Nymphia species, and they have even found several hybrids. And in fact, that's a serious thing because those new hybrids are more vigorous and more aggressive than the parents. So that is that actually, I mean, that they have found. But there may be other cases also, but that is the only known example of case of a natural hybridization of a native plants with that invasive species. There may be others too.
මම උදේට මට ප්‍රශ්න කීපයක් තියෙනවා කාරණා කීපයක් දැනගන්න අවශ්‍ය නිසායි මම කොළඹ නගරයේ තිරින් නගරයක් කියන ප්‍රකාශයක් පත්ලා තියෙනවා ඒ වගේම කොළඹ district එක කියලා ගත්තාම කොළඹ district එකේ සමහරක් සාමාන්‍ය තිත්පි සමහරක් තිත්පි තාම සංරක්ෂණයට හෝ ඒ සංරක්ෂණ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයට නතර වෙලා නැහැ කියලා අපිට දැනෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ තාම කරකවන තත්ත්වයක් කියලා දැන් තේරෙන්නේ. ඒකද කොළඹ නගරය තියෙන නගර දැන් ප්‍රමාණිකූලව හොමෝකෝ කරලා එහාට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඒකෝර මේකත් එක්ක ලම්බෝල කඳුරේකියෙන් පටන් ගන්නවා ප්‍රධාන ලංකා නම්බර එකයි තියෙන්නේ. එකක් මේ කොළඹ ස්ට්‍රීට් අයිති. පක්කුවේ සහ උස්සරිය. දැන් උස්සරිය පක්කුවේ තියෙන පිටි ගමන්නකට එක්ක තියෙන්නේ තාමත් පොඩි දෙවි ප්‍රමාණයක් තමයි කඩොක් කරලා යනකොට තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි උස්සරිය ඔය ගලකෙතර පාලමෙන් පල්ලෙහාට තියෙන කොටස තාමත් විශේෂයි. මොකද ඒකට හේතු කාරණා කීපයක් තියෙනවා. ලංකාවේ ග්‍රාම නාම ගත්තාම දෙවියන් හඳුන්වන අතිවිශාල ග්‍රාම නාම ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ විලංගු කරගන්න ඒක අපි උන්නේ. හැබැයි බරාව කියන දෙද්දිම ඒ කියන්නේ බරාව කියන්නේ යුනික් වර්ඩ් එකක්. ඒකට ආවිනික වෙච්ච ගතිලක්ෂණ ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි තාමත් මේ දෙද්දිම සංරක්ෂිත හෝ සංරක්ෂණය සඳහා වුණ කරන අවශ්‍ය කරන උත්පාදනයන් හෝ සහ ජනතාවදානය යොමු වෙලා නැහැ. ඒකට හේතුව විවිධ දේශපාලන කණ්ඩායම්වලට මේක උදාහරණයක් කිමින් පවතිනවා තමන්ගේ මෙගා මිනි ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් සඳහා ඉස්සරහට ගෙනියන්න. ඉතින් මෙන්න මේකට අවශ්‍ය කරන දෙද්දිමකට අවශ්‍ය කරන ඒ ආරක්ෂාව සහ ජනතාවට අයිතියක් තියෙනවා ඒ අභාග ගන්න ඒක සම්බන්ධ ජනතා කණ්ඩායම් කිව්වොත් ඒ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ජීවිතය ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන මේ ජීව සංරක්ෂණය කරගන්න තියෙන වැඩසටහන ගැන මම කැමති දැනගන්න. පළවෙනි කාරණා. දෙවෙනි කාරණාව තාමත් පැහැදිලි විශේෂයෙන්ම සිරිල් ඒ වගේම ප්‍රොෆෙසර් ඒ වගේම අනිත් මේ තිබ්බින් වල තියෙන මූලික කාරණාව අපේ මුගමයන් විදිහට මිනිස්සු වාර්තා කරනකොට තාමත් චුද්ධ මට්ටමේ විදිහට තිබ්බින් වල තියෙනවා. දැන් වාර්තා කරනවා විලවිලුව කිව්වා වගේම මඩිට මඩ මේවත් තිබ්බින් කඳුකරේ තැන් තැන් වල තියෙන තිබ්බින්. එතකොට මේ අපේ මේ ග්‍රාම නාම කරා පවා එන මේ තිබ්බින් සංරක්ෂණයේදී විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒ වගේම අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තාම මාතර දිස්ත්‍රික්කය සහ අනිත් කඳුර ප්‍රදේශවල තියෙන දා මට්ටමේ තියෙන ඒවත් හෝ ගම්මාසික වල තියෙන දා මේ දෙකකින් කොහොමද යම් ආකාරයෙන් වර්ගීකරණය කරගන්න. ඒවට තියෙන ආරක්ෂාව සපයා ගන්න. මොකද මේක හරි වැදගත් වෙන්නේ. මේ කඳුර කඳුර ප්‍රදේශවල තියෙන දා ප්‍රදේශවල තියෙන මේ පුරා දෙකකින් අපි විශාල දායකත්වයක් දක්වනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ ආර්ථිකයට විශේෂම අතුෂ්කරණය. දෙවෙනි කාරණාව එළමල් ගහේ ඉඳන් ඒ වගේම ඉතින් තියෙන අනිකුත් සියලුම ජල සංරක්ෂණ සඳහා කරගෙන මේවා ඇත්තටම අපි යම් ආකාරයක විශේෂයෙන් දිවි සංරක්ෂණයේදී සංරක්ෂිත කරලා විදිහට අපි පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඒක අපි ඉන්නේ ඒවා කරලා කියනවා කොහොමද සුඛී අවස්ථාව තුන.
Are there any more questions from the audience?
Question, but I just make a comment. This country is having a crisis of interest. It's crazy. You know, you tell the organizers to at least attempt to dialogue to find something when it happens. And I suggest you insist on this. It is so old. It's unbearable. And I think
No, it's cold.
yeah, but
We will pass the message.
I would say this, it's not like otherwise, you'll die in the book. Watch this poor lady there, and she's shivering. With t-shirts, it's hot outside. And then it's minus something in here.
Thanks. We will pass the message. Take care. Yeah.
I've not been to the hot springs for some time, for about 3 years. What I found was that last time I went, they were trying to eradicate the invasive plants. How far is it successful? With the bamboos and all that.
question. They have actually started removing those Ulex europaeus, that yellow-flowered thorny plant, and in a way, they have at the time of the removal, they have totally removed the ghost plantation. I mean, the stands. At the time, just after the removal, there was not a single plant, but after some time they came up again, because unless you monitor the growth and keep on removing, it will come back again. Same is true with this water hyacinth, Japan Japanese sardine and all that. You can remove, but then after 3-4 months time, that will come again. Unless you have a proper monitoring system, it won't work. More than that, in modern days, there are some endemic species that are spreading. We don't know why. Maybe due to climate change or whatever. Especially this Arundinaria densifolia is spreading and it's covering most of the water bodies. So there are problems like that happening, and this is a different subject altogether, so I don't want to go into details. And then about this Barao thing, the Panagoda Army Camp, I think, is using Barao for shooting practice. That's one thing. And there are other things also, but then you asked about these traditional wetland types. Of course, there are ovitas. Ovita is a wetland. Denier, so wetlands. And so many village names, so many deniers, so many avitas. They are ovitas. They are all wetlands.
Thank you. I want to once again thank our speakers today, and we have a small token of appreciation for our speakers. I would like to invite Professor Lakdas Fernando to hand over the written presents. Professor Cyril Vijayasundara. Professor Sampath Selviratna. And Professor Sevanti Chayakodi. Thank you to everyone who joined us here at the BMICH today, and also to our audience on Zoom. We had over 100 people join us, which was fantastic. So thank you for coming along and enjoying this session. I would like to also remind you that our next lecture will be on the 24th of March, and we have Dr. Ansem Visova speaking about crocodiles. So mark your calendars for that as well, please. The speakers should be around for a little bit longer, so if you do have any questions for them, you're welcome to speak to them outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Siri, for traveling from Kandy.